So I am Katie, and I'm very happy to be with you guys here tonight. I am going to be talking about charity towards criminals, which we can find in the Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec, chapter 11, item 14. And it's very connected to the last two lectures that we've had. We've had, the charity theme going on. So last week we had Ricardo talking about the necessity for charity according to Paul. And previously, Marcelo talked about material and moral charity. So I will be doing the continuation of that. And to start us off, I'm going to read a poem that I made specifically for this lecture. So here we go. Practice charity towards criminals. Love them too, for they are a part of our family, if we only knew. One way to show our love is compassion, empathy put into action. May we rethink our prejudices, rename and reframe. The path of Jesus is our ultimate aim. Practice charity towards criminals. Love them too, for they are a part of our family, if we only knew. One way to show our love is to take responsibility, our capability to show docility and humility, remembering that we sometimes are in their place. It is our duty, such a beauty to embrace. Practice charity towards criminals, love them too, for they are a part of our family, if we only knew. One way to show our love is to practice forgiving. Some say it is the only way worth living. What's done is done, leave it in the past. Live in the present and you will feel good fast. Compassion, responsibility, and forgiveness are the virtue three. Tonight during our talk, we will hear and see. So let's get into charity. And if you guys know where to unmute yourself, you can tell me, what do you think charity is? What comes to mind?
Helping someone in need.
Okay.
It could be like giving something material or maybe a word.
Yes. Anybody else? I know Mia just wants to talk. She's trying to find the unmute button. Okay. Anyway, so charity is anything, all the virtues that are under love. We have here compassion, responsibility, forgiveness. There's respect. There's kindness. Everything that you would like to feel for yourself is charity. And we're going to be talking tonight about charity according to Spiritism, which I'm going to be focusing more on the moral charity rather than the physical charity, okay? And also, let me see here, I have a multiple choice answer, question and answer, and I want you guys to tell me which one do you think is the right answer. What is charity? A, feeding the poor. B, volunteering your time. C, being honest. D, being punctual. Or E, saying a prayer. Trick question, it is all of them, okay? And charity, like this is all the being loving, right? We want to have all of these virtues. And here we have some physical charity as well as some moral charity that we will get into more during the lecture. Who is a criminal? A, is it a thief? B, an arsonist? C, a kidnapper? D, a liar? Or E, a gossiper? Again, trick question. All of them, okay? So tonight we are going to be talking about criminals, and criminal is and what we're going to be talking about tonight has a very wide sense, a very wide spectrum, okay? So crimes can be more severe, as we see in the first couple, to less severe. But nonetheless, they are crimes because you were committing a wrong to someone, maybe hurting them in some way. And also these crimes that we're going to be talking about tonight can be intentional, they can be unintentional. They can be by people that you love, people, your family, your friends. They can be by strangers, okay? And crimes we're talking about today can be crimes committed against the law of God and also crimes committed against laws here on earth. So what we're talking about tonight is very wide because really crimes englobe all of these things that I've just talked about and as we will talk about tonight. So saying that, these are the three virtues that inspired me the most when I read this chapter, the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 11, because after all, there are many virtues that we can practice to practice charity towards criminals, but I chose these three because these were the ones that inspired me the most after reading this chapter. So let's take a look at compassion, and we're going to see how these are all connected and how these will help us with charity. Compassion is empathy in action, right? It's being kind every day or as much as we can. Whenever we think about it, it's a constant practice. And we have here, rethink it, rename it, and reframe it. So these are some subtopics, some ideas to help us practice that compassion. Rethink it. So I'm going to tell you guys a little story. It's actually a historical event that a lot of people here, Americans, will study when they're in school. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it and see if anyone can tell me what I'm talking about. Imagine you are in a small town in 1862, and this small town has just gotten over a pandemic of smallpox. There has just been a civil war. There is big rivalry between the rich and the poor. And there are also some Indians that will sometimes come and attack this village, this town. And so amongst all of these things, there's lots of tension going along. And everybody is suspicious of their neighbor. And you can just feel that things are bubbling. And then one night, a group of young girls goes out into the woods, and they say that they are possessed by the devil. And they said that they blame it on a witch. So does anybody know what I'm talking about? I have my little prop here. This is my witch hat. This is the 1862 Salem witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts. And this is a very famous historical event that is famous still until today. And why is that? It's because this event, this group of people, this community really didn't, let's say, rethink, which is what this topic is about, didn't really think before they acted. And 19 people were hanged, 150 men, women, and children were proven guilty of witchcraft. Okay, but then after time went on and they were like, okay, maybe we got a little too far away and maybe we shouldn't have done that. But guess what? They already hung so many people and they can't take that back. So this story came to my mind when I was thinking about compassion and rethinking, and it just goes to show us that we should rethink things before we act, because sometimes we can't take things back, as is in this case, before we point fingers, before we make judgments, okay? And we do this every day, sometimes without even thinking, because it just comes to our mind. For example, me, a few months ago, I went out into my backyard and I saw that my hammock had been ripped. And I was thinking, wow, how did that rip? I was there last night and it was fine, and this morning it's ripped. And then I think, well, it must have been my gardeners, because those are the only people who were there between last night and this morning. So I'm thinking, man, my gardeners broke my hammock. And then I go closer to it, and if you take a look, I brought it here for you guys to see. That is an animal, most likely. A squirrel, a possum, I don't know. But it wasn't my gardener. I really highly doubt that. So just to show you that we are always, judging and pointing fingers, and oftentimes before we even know what really happened. Just like this town of Salem said that they were witches. So we really have to rethink before we act and before we point fingers, and that is being compassionate. That's my hammock picture. Okay. Do not judge or never make a complete judgment, my friends. Inasmuch as the verdict you will pronounce will be applied even more severely to yourself. So you will need indulgence for those sins you so unceasingly incur. So this is in the Gospel according to Spiritism that this lecture is based upon. So after we think it, we have rename it. We brand people as offenders, criminals, crooks, felons, convicts, lawbreakers, outlaws, and delinquents. And I found this in a psych magazine. I think it's pronounced Aeon. I've never heard of it before, but it went very well with this lecture. And the author of this article says that talking about people like this is wrong-headed and prejudiced. It puts limitations and scars on their identity. So imagine you committed a crime and you were, I don't know, young, you were 19. And then later when you're 64, you're still labeled a criminal. This is very hurtful, and it really messes with your identity. You're not a criminal. You are a person who committed a crime. So it's very different when we reword these things. It's much kinder. the person is not a criminal. You don't want to be called that. If you lied when you were young, you don't want to be called a liar your whole life if you've changed around. So it's very important what we call people and label people. We name it, now we frame it. NLP is a neurolinguistic programming. I learned this technique, reframing, in NLP, but it's also a very common technique in many therapies. And what it is that you will extract the good intention from a maybe not so desired behavior to kind of turn it around, perception around, to make it less negative and a little bit more positive. So let's say, for example, someone broke into my car and stole my laptop. And of course, I'm sad, I'm mad, I'm upset. I've lost lots of photos and documents, and it's an expensive, computer, right? And I go around for, who knows, weeks and months and just really thinking bad about that person, maybe hating that person, wishing bad for that person. And that's not doing me any good. It's not doing the person any good. If we take it and reframe it, and we somehow are able to go into the person's mind who stole my computer. Let's say his name is John, and John stole my computer. And the reason that he did it was because he wanted to pay for his son to go on a field trip. He already couldn't pay for his son's last field trip because he didn't have any money. John is a ex-criminal, right? A person who committed a crime in the past, and he has a record, and therefore he can't get maybe a good paying job, and he cannot pay for his son's field trip. He really wants to pay for his son's field trip, and then his coworker tells him, hey, I've stolen some things before, I can give you some tips how to do it. It's a nice side job. And so sure enough, John goes and steals my computer. But having the background a little bit makes me feel sorry for him, makes me pity him a little bit, and makes me feel, oh man, his poor son can't go on a field trip. Not that it makes the situation better, but it makes my negative feelings a little bit lighter, okay? So this is what reframing does. First, here's my frame. Lots of, boy, my grass is in the way. Okay, so here I'm like mad and full of hate and full of anger. And when I think about his story, then I'm like, okay, I mean, my computer's still gone, but I'm not as mad at him. So reframing helps us to have that compassion towards criminals, towards people who have done us wrong. Doesn't erase it, but it helps. Sublime charity, as taught by Jesus, consists in the constant use of benevolence in all things pertaining to your neighbor. Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 11. So there we have compassion. And now once we have a little bit of tools of showing compassion towards people who have done us wrong, we are then able to step back and take a look at, okay, what am I doing in this scenario? What is my responsibility? If someone is doing something wrong to me, how am I reacting? Am I sending them good vibes, negative vibes? So I am responsible for my reaction. So let's take a look at responsibility. Responsibility is our ability to respond. Let me take a look here. Yes, okay. So now we have a nice little video that has been going on YouTube. It's called the Candy Challenge, and it is when parents put some yummy candy or some other yummy food in front of them, and they say, hey, don't eat this candy until I get back. And then they film them, and they see how long they can do it. Okay, so look at this video. I'll show about a minute of it. Let's play. You guys hear? Can you guys hear?
No, I can't.
I cannot.
No.
You can see it. Okay, but there's subtitles, right? There's subtitles, right?
Yeah, we can read it.
Okay, so read the subtitles. I don't know why my volume doesn't go to your volume, but that's why I want to check with you guys. So read the subtitles, please. Okay. Okay, so let me get out of here. You guys hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so my point in showing this is to show that this little brother here, let me see if I'm still in my slide here. Okay, this little brother guy is more responsible than his younger sister, and he is given a set of rules to follow, and he's following them, and he's helping his younger sister do it as well, because she is committing a crime, according to her parents, don't eat the candy. And so we have people around us who maybe commit some crimes, and we should not point fingers, we should not blame them, we should always be loving to them. It is our duty to follow Jesus's teachings. We know that we're supposed to do this, so we are more responsible than perhaps a more ignorant person that doesn't know God's laws. So it's very important when we see a person committing a crime for us to still be loving to them. That is our duty. Consider yourselves to be more reprehensible, more guilty than those to whom you deny pardon and commiseration, because as often as not, they do not know God as you do, and consequently less will be asked of them than is asked of you. Who has not taken some nice candy with you into the movies? You stuff it into your jacket, maybe you bring a drink, okay? So this is against the movie laws, the movie rules, and therefore also the laws here on earth. I remember also I would not follow the law, the rules. When I was younger, they were building some houses across my street, and they had the frame of all the houses, but there was no walls yet. They were constructing them. And then at night, what did me and all my friends do? We went and played in the house. It was super awesome. But now that I think of it, that was so wrong. There were no walls. It's very dangerous, and I'm trespassing. So how many of Earth's laws are we committing every day? So small that we don't think anything of it. And then if you think about that, how many of God's laws, small maybe, are we committing every day, such as lying, gossiping, maybe bullying somebody, and we don't really think anything of it. So it's very important for us to be aware of even the little things that we do. Are you ignorant of the fact that there are many actions considered as crimes in the eyes of God, who symbolizes pureness, that the world does not deem as even small offenses? Gospel according to Spiritism. It is an embrace. So when we embrace Jesus's teachings and God's laws, we take responsibility for our actions. The little brother's taking responsibility. I take responsibility for maybe sneaking some candy into the movie. There are many ex-criminals, right? People who have committed crimes who later repent and they take responsibility and they turn their life around 180. I have two examples here. We have this guy, his name is Johnny, and he grew up in the 1970s, and he grew up in a family that was very prejudiced, and they even encouraged him to be mean to Black people. And when he grew up, he joined the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and he would beat up many Black people. He would burn crosses in front of their house, and he even burned down a Black church. And then one day he read Luke 15, which is about the prodigal son, and he repents, and he turns his life around, and he eventually becomes a very influential and important leader in a predominantly Black church. And he even goes on to help the FBI break down some white supremacy groups. So we see here that he embraced God, he took responsibility, and he really started to, change his life. And we have another guy here. His name is Joshua, and he admitted to killing 20,000 people in the Liberian Civil War, which he was a very important leader of this war. And he also recruited 20,000 children to fight in this war. He was a cannibal. He practiced cannibalism and human sacrifice to gain empowerment. So very shocking, right? And then there was a pastor who went to visit him, and then suddenly he said that he saw Jesus in a light, and he also repented. And he started to go church to church, repenting and confessing his sins and talking to the relatives of the families, you know, the people that he had killed, and he really changed his life around. He took responsibility and he embraced God. So there we have it, responsibility. And then when you take responsibility, it helps pave the pathway for forgiveness. Not that it's going to make you forgive completely, but it helps you on that pathway. And for forgiveness here, I have 3 different stories that the people have forgiven, and hopefully they will inspire you as much as they have inspired me to forgive. First one here, we have Matt and Eric. Matt, who was on the extreme left side, he was about 19 when he was an ambulance driver, and he was on a 20-hour shift that he had no sleep, and then he drove home and he fell asleep on the wheel. And what happened? He caused a car accident, and the other car had a pregnant woman and her younger 2-year-old daughter, and the pregnant woman and her unborn child died. Of course, it was an accident, but still you can imagine the devastation of the husband, which is here on the extreme right. He was a pastor, and the people of his church told him, hey, this is your opportunity to practice what you've been preaching. Forgive this man. And that's what he did. He didn't press charges, and he wanted to meet this guy, and they eventually met, and they had weekly lunches, and they formed a really tight bond and friendship that has lasted years later. As you can see in this picture, they actually spent Christmas together, and they also travel very frequently together. Eric, which is on the right side, remarried. You can see the woman, 1, 2, 3. He remarried, and they have a new daughter, because the daughter that survived is much older now. But this is a very inspirational story, really, of forgiveness, that it's possible. Let's go on to Thordis and Tom. They were boyfriend and girlfriend in Iceland. She was 16 and he was 18, and they went to a Christmas party, and she drank rum for the first time, got a little bit too tipsy, and he took advantage, and he had sexual relations with her without her consent. And years later, I think it was 9 years later, she's still having trouble coping with what has happened. And she decides to seek him out and talk to him. And they end up meeting, and they talk about the whole situation over a week's period. And she found that this really, really helped her get over this traumatic event. And they wrote a book together, and it also turned into a TED Talk. So you can go look, Thordis and Tom TED Talk, and you will find it. It's also very inspirational. And again, she says that, it's not for everybody. You're raped, you don't necessarily want to go talk to the person. She doesn't recommend it to everyone. It was her boyfriend, so they had a little bit of a relationship. It wasn't a stranger. So also very inspirational story of forgiveness there. Last one here, we have Marley and he, because we don't know his name. Marley went to a bar in Chicago, and a stranger also sexually abused her without her consent, and she pressed charges. And when she was going through the court process, and the criminal hearings, she said that it made her feel worse to have to go through make her go through everything. And she was like, this is not working for me, because I'm hearing the defense lawyer defend this guy who did this to me. This is not working. And then somehow she found out about restorative justice, which I'm very interested in too. I didn't know this existed, that you and the other party will have a type of therapy. So her and this guy actually sat in a therapy circle for 8 hours and talked it out. And she got, what she wanted, because she said that going through the court process, she wasn't going to understand why he did it. But talking it out, she got to have her answers, and she said that she forgave him as a human being, which she probably wouldn't have been able to do through the normal, typical court process. And I think that this restorative justice option is really awesome, and it's a really kinder way to do it, because our traditional system is very punitive, right? So that would not be practicing charity towards the criminals, right? And I was supposed to do this in the beginning, but here we go. We have 2 people here. So imagine that this person hurts this person, and let's say you're hurt, your arm is kind of broken, let's say, would you go and break this person's arm too? No, it's best for us to actually talk it out and to help heal that process. You don't want to go and break somebody else's arm, right? So let's heal, let's go together and work together and practice this charity towards criminals, being compassionate, showing responsibility that you also have part in what happened and part in how you react to it, so we can go on that process towards forgiveness. And very interesting that these 3 cases that I just told you about, they all felt better when they got together and talked it out face to face. So that was a very interesting, I don't know if it's coincidence, probably not. It's probably a very good, useful tool for us to forgive. You must love the miserable, the criminals as God's creatures, to whom forgiveness and mercy must be shown if they repent, like it has been done to yourselves for your faults against the law. And I found this in the Spiritist review. Recapping, compassion. We think before we point fingers, before we judge. Rename. Instead of calling a criminal, an ex-criminal, let's call them a person who has committed a crime. That way it's not messing with their identity. Reframe. Let's try to think about the situation. Why did that person do it? And just try to help think of ways how I can help turn my negative energy into something a little bit more positive. Okay, so this is showing compassion, which will then help us then take responsibility to see, how am I reacting towards this person who has maybe done me wrong? It is my duty to follow Jesus's teachings and to embrace God's laws. And then it helps me go into the process of forgiveness. And we have the 3 examples I talked about. One, when the wife was killed, and the other 2 about being sexually assaulted there. And I will end with the poem that I read in the beginning, because I think it is so powerful. Where is it at? Practice charity towards criminals. Love them too, for they are part of our family, if we only knew. One way to show our love is compassion, empathy put into action. May we rethink our prejudices, rename and reframe. The path of Jesus is our ultimate aim. Practice charity towards criminals. Love them too, for they are a part of our family, if we only knew. One way to show our love is to take responsibility, our capability to show docility and humility, remembering that we sometimes are in their place. It is our duty, such a beauty, to embrace. Practice charity towards criminals. Love them too, for they are part of our family, if we only knew. One way to show our love is to practice forgiving. Some say it is the only way worth living. What's done is done. Leave it in the past. Live in the present, and you will feel good fast. Thank you. I will begin our